Welcome to This Explainer. Look, today we've got a truly fascinating and honestly incredibly intense piece of source material to unpack. We're going to neutrally and carefully examine a dense manifesto by an author named Bindananda Das, titled The Quantum Persecution of the Sentient Soul. Now, this document is highly charged. It's emotional, it's complex, and it deals with some massive themes. Everything from unseen surveillance to extreme physical claims and outright spiritual warfare. To really grasp what the author is communicating here without getting lost in the weeds, we're going to use a structured, thematic lens to break down these claims. So let's just dive right in.
The author doesn't waste any time, right? We are dropped straight into this terrifying, high-stakes scenario from the very first line. Das claims that contract killers have literally sprayed gas to wake him up for the last 3 years. This brilliantly illustrates the core anxiety of the entire text, what Das calls games of observational behavior. The author feels completely surrounded by entities mapping out his actions. He claims they force actions that might look like compulsive behavior to a psychiatrist, but are actually a form of deep orchestrated control. So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The quantum persecution claim. 2. Institutional allegations. 3. The 3 stages of control. 4. Secret technologies. And 5. Spiritual stakes.
Starting with Section 1, the quantum persecution claim.
According to Dosky, the world is strictly divided into 2 groups, the observed and the observers. But these aren't just passive watchers on the sidelines. The text claims that high-class observers actively and forcefully exploit the weak. And the motive here is crucial. The author asserts that these observers manipulate and force actions upon others so they can project a blameless, righteous nature onto themselves. It's like they're transferring their own sins onto their victims simply by observing them. Dotz defines this whole dynamic with a really specific term: quantum mechanical fear. In this state, the world is supposedly controlled by evil forces, which the text calls Satans, who actually use religion as their biggest weapon of control. It's a worldview where the very act of being observed changes your fate. It's not just general paranoia about being watched. It's this deep belief that observation fundamentally alters reality, allowing these sinful observers to walk away totally blameless.
Moving on to Section 2, institutional and authority allegations. Now, Das claims that the entire concept of authority has been infiltrated from the inside out. The text states that intelligence agencies like RAW, the Army, and the local police are fundamentally compromised by fake duplicates. And we're not just talking about corrupt officials here. They are described as literal criminals and fraudsters with high emotional IQs who misuse their power to frame innocent people. It paints a picture of complete and total institutional collapse from the victim's perspective. And this creates a horrific systemic trap. Think about it. Citizens expect authorities to protect them through standard face-to-face interrogations, right? Well, Das claims the reality is entirely different. He asserts that local police actively ignore victims, while foreign agents secretly register legal cases over in the West to avoid local prosecution and obscure their databases. It's basically an inescapable bureaucratic nightmare where the victim has absolutely zero local recourse. Section 3. The 3 stages of control. Now, despite the chaotic nature of the text, Das actually outlines a highly specific internal logic used by these controllers. It's a strict 3-step playbook. Step 1, they showcased extreme power. Maybe they claim to be a judge who can hand down the death penalty. Step 2, they act as a rescuer. They might file a medical case, but sadistically force the patient to fund their own mandatory treatment. Step 3, they assert total dominance by claiming superior knowledge, teaching the victim a lesson from afar, without ever granting them a face-to-face meeting to explain what sin they supposedly committed. It is a deeply calculated psychological breakdown. Section 4. Secret technologies and weapons. Okay, here's where things get heavily reliant on advanced, esoteric concepts. Das vividly describes a weapon called the third eye laser shot. This isn't just a camera or a bug. The text asserts this is a highly secret technology capable of rewriting brain neural patterns and even physically changing someone's facial structure. The author claims this tech is used to project a criminal's face onto an innocent person, effectively forcing that innocent person to take the punishment for sins they had nothing to do with. It's an absolute violation of physical and mental identity. He even provides a specific mathematical equation for this behavioral control. Das theorizes that by combining a chemical release with strong electromagnetic radiation, these shadow groups can dictate human actions with 100% probability. They essentially act as a hypnotist, completely overriding free will to force a specific action. And the darkest part? Once that action is forced upon the victim, it immediately becomes the justification for their persecution.
But here's an interesting twist. Who is actually doing all this? The text specifically notes that the perpetrators didn't invent this technology themselves. They aren't evil genius creators. Instead, Das describes them as angry slaves of politicians or even film actors who work for intelligence agencies to gather information and frame people. They're just cogs in a massive corrupt machine, driven by their own sins and anger.
Section 5. Spiritual and Physical Stakes.
The manifesto draws this sharp, totally unforgiving line between two distinct groups. On one side, you have the sinful souls, the controllers. They know their mortal bodies will be destroyed, they lack true intelligence, and they're desperately seeking ulterior transactions to cleanse themselves. On the exact opposite side is the victim, who Das calls the artist. The artist is highly intelligent, possesses genuine creative power, and is specifically targeted because of it. Das even claims the perpetrators' families, lacking intelligence themselves, use black magic to block the artist's creative work. The author then catalogs a truly graphic array of biological and physical attacks he claims to have endured. Remember the spray gas from the beginning? He mentions being woken up by that gas for 3 years straight. He talks about remote phone hacking, being trapped by black magic, and severe medical warfare. Das claims he was given viruses, intentionally inflicted with blood cancer, physically hurt in the spleen, and forcibly made into a diabetic patient. The scope of the physical suffering described here is just staggering.
And Das states that he genuinely tried to do the right thing. He claims he attempted to share all this secret intelligence with the police and the military. But because those institutions are allegedly run by Satans, his attempts to report the crimes only resulted in even more intense persecution. It was all supposedly aimed at destroying his mind and his creative work of art. The source document concludes with this incredibly powerful, definitive phrase. It is a desperate, intense curse against the orchestrators of this quantum-level conspiracy. Satans of the world shall be cursed. It is his final assertion of spiritual power against an overwhelming, technologically advanced, and unseen enemy.
So what do we take away from all this? We've explored the claims strictly as they are presented in the text. And while we remain perfectly objective and impartial about these specific, extreme allegations, analyzing a text like this leaves us with a profound question. How does the intense isolation of our modern digital age amplify our deepest human fears? When we feel constantly watched by algorithms and unseen systems, how does that shape the extreme narratives we are capable of constructing about our own reality? It's definitely something deeply important to think about. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.